Y'all wanted the whole story. Not the version I put in press releases, not the version my publicist cleaned up for the business magazines. The real one. So pour something strong, because by the time I'm done, you're gonna understand exactly why I did what I did. And I promise you, if you were me, you'd have done it too. My name is Deja Whitfield. I'm 25 years old, and 2 months ago, my own mother served me a lawsuit in front of 400 investors. Before we continue, please hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. Now, let's continue. The champagne was still cold in my hand when the doors of the Meridian Grand Ballroom in Atlanta swung open and a woman in a gray blazer walked straight through my security line like she owned the building. "Deja Whitfield?" she said, loud enough for the front 3 rows to hear over the string quartet. "That's me," I said, still smiling for the cameras, still riding the high of the announcement I'd just made. Root and Crown Beauty, the company I built out of my grandmother's kitchen, had just been valued at $80 million by Meridian Capital Group. You've been served. The manila envelope hit my palm like a brick. Flashbulbs went off. My chief of staff, Simone, was already moving toward me, but it was too late. Half the room had their phones up. I opened it right there, because I refused to let anyone see my hands shake. Whitfield v. Whitfield, plaintiffs, Donald Whitfield and Renee Whitfield. My father, my mother. The 2 people who dropped me off at my grandmother's porch in Detroit 20 years ago and never came back. Not for a birthday, not for a graduation, not for a single Christmas, were suing me. For $26 million, claiming ownership of the recipe my company was built on, the recipe my grandmother taught me, the recipe that came from her mother, not from Donald Whitfield's side of the family at all. I remember the exact sound the room made, that collective gasp, then the low murmur of 400 investors deciding in real time whether my company was still a good bet. Simone leaned in. "Deja, say something, now." I looked at the reporters. I looked at the cameras, and I said the only thing that felt true. I built this company from nothing, the same way I built myself from nothing. Excuse me. I walked off that stage smiling. Inside, I was 20 years old again, standing at a bus stop in the rain, alone. The rain hit different when you're 5 years old and nobody's coming back for you. I was sitting on the front steps of a row house on Linwood Street in Detroit, my Cinderella backpack soaked through, watching my father's brown Buick disappear around the corner. My mother didn't even roll the window down to wave. "Grandma's gonna watch you for a little while, baby," my father had said that morning, not looking at me while he said it. "We'll be back before you know it." That was 2005. I'm still waiting. My grandmother, Odessa Freeman, everybody called her Miss Odessa, or Big Mama if you were family, opened that door in her housecoat and found a 5-year-old shivering on her steps with a note pinned to my backpack. Not a letter, a note. 4 sentences scrawled on the back of a gas station receipt. "Ma, watch Deja for a few weeks. Donald and I need to sort some things out. Love you, R." Big Mama told me later she waited 11 days by that phone before she called every hospital, every jail, and finally the police. Nobody had seen Donald or Renee Whitfield. They'd cleared out their apartment, gone. A few weeks turned into 20 years. I don't remember crying that first night. Big Mama says I didn't cry for almost a month, like my body was in shock. What I remember is the smell of her kitchen. Shea butter melting on the stove, black soap, the mint she grew in a coffee can on the windowsill. She'd rub that shea butter blend into my scalp every Sunday night, humming Mahalia Jackson under her breath, and tell me, "Your roots don't determine your crown, baby. You hear me? Don't nobody get to decide who you become but you." I didn't know it then, but that Sunday night ritual, that recipe, would be worth $80 million one day. I also didn't know my parents would come back one day and try to take it from me. Absolutely not! Big Mama's voice cracked through the kitchen like a whip. I was 11, standing in that same kitchen, holding a flyer for a talent show at Northwestern High that cost $40 to enter. $40 we didn't have, not with Big Mama working double shifts at the Ford plant cafeteria and me wearing shoes 2 sizes too small because new ones weren't in the budget. "I'll figure it out myself then," I snapped. 11 years old and already too proud for my own good. "That's the spirit I like to see," she said, softer now, pulling a coffee can down from the cabinet, her savings, in cash, hidden in plain sight. "But you ain't gotta figure everything out alone, Deja. That's what I'm here for." That was the year I learned 2 things that shaped everything after: how to braid hair well enough that grown women started paying me $5 a session in Big Mama's kitchen, and the truth about my Aunt Pearl. Aunt Pearl, Big Mama's youngest daughter, a paralegal who'd later put herself through law school, sat me down that same year and told me something Big Mama never would. "Your daddy didn't just leave, Deja," she said, voice low so Big Mama wouldn't hear from the next room. "He owed money, bad money, card game money, to people who don't send letters when you're late. They send worse. Your mama went with him because she was scared not to. I always believed, in her heart, she meant to come back for you. I don't believe that about him." I didn't cry. I just filed it away, the way I filed away everything hard back then. But it planted something in me, not quite forgiveness for my mother, but a seed of it, a seed that would matter a lot 20 years later in a courtroom. By 12, I had 11 regular clients paying me for braids. By 14, I was mixing my own version of Big Mama's shea butter blend and selling 4-ounce jars out of a cooler at the bus stop for $6 each. Big Mama caught me counting my money on the porch one evening and just shook her head, smiling. "Girl, you got your great-grandmother's hands and my mother's stubbornness. Lord help whoever gets in your way." She had no idea how right she was. I stood in the financial aid office at Wayne State University at 18 years old, staring at a bill that said I was $2,340 short for the semester, and I had exactly $63 to my name. "There's nothing else I can offer you right now," the advisor said, not unkindly, just tired, budget cuts, everybody's story that year. I sold jars of my hair butter out of a rolling cooler between classes for the next 8 months. I called it Root and Crown before I even had a logo. The name came from something Big Mama used to say, about roots and crowns, about where you come from not deciding who you become. My roommate freshman year, a girl named Ashanti Reynolds, was the first person outside my family to believe in it before it was anything. "You need a website," she told me one night, both of us cross-legged on a dorm room floor covered in shea butter stains. "I know a guy who'll build you one for $200. I didn't have $200. Ashanti had 100 and Big Mama, when I called her crying with pride and fear mixed together, wired me the other 100 from a savings account I didn't even know she still had. "This is the last of it," Big Mama said on the phone, and I heard something in her voice I'd never heard before, not doubt, but the weight of hope. "Make it count, baby." I did. By 20, Root and Crown was doing $40,000 a year in online sales out of my apartment kitchen. By 22, I had a real manufacturer, 3 employees, and a write-up in Essence magazine titled "The College Dropout Building a Beauty Empire from Her Grandmother's Kitchen." I dropped out senior year, 1 semester short, because the orders were coming faster than I could fill them by hand. Big Mama cried when she saw that magazine on the newsstand at the Kroger on Woodward. Not because I'd made it. Because, she told me later, it was the first time in 20 years she felt like she hadn't failed me. She never knew, not then, that the 2 people who actually had failed me were about to come crawling back the second my name showed up in print. I was standing in my first real office, 4,000 square feet in an Atlanta business park, my name on the lease, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, the way I let everything unfamiliar go to voicemail after building a business that attracted its fair share of scammers. I almost deleted it without listening. I wish, some days, that I had. Deja, baby, it's your mother. I sat down on the edge of my desk so hard I nearly missed the chair entirely. I saw the article. Lord, look at you. I think about you every single day. I want you to know that. Your father and I, we made mistakes, bad ones, but we're different people now. We'd love to see you, if you'd let us. No pressure, baby. Just call your mama back. I didn't call back for 6 days. When I finally did, sitting in my car in a Target parking lot, because I couldn't have that conversation anywhere that felt permanent, Renee Whitfield cried before I even said a full sentence. I know I don't deserve this call, she said. I know. Then why'd you make it? I asked. Not cruel, just honest. Because your daddy's been sick. Because I'm 51 years old, and I don't want to die without my daughter knowing I loved her the whole time, even when I couldn't show it. Against every warning bell, Aunt Pearl and Big Mama both rang in my ear. I agreed to meet them. I told myself I was being the bigger person. I told myself 25-year-old me could handle whatever 5-year-old me never got closure on. I had no idea I was walking into the opening move of a con, 20 years in the making. I chose the restaurant, Bones, a steakhouse in Buckhead, public, expensive, on my terms. I wanted them to see exactly who they'd abandoned. Donald Whitfield walked in first, 63 years old, silver at the temples, wearing a suit that looked new and probably was. Renee followed a step behind, smaller than I remembered, nervous in a way that almost made something in my chest ache. Look at you, my father said, arms half open like he expected a hug. I shook his hand instead. His face flickered, just for a second, with something that looked less like hurt and more like recalculation. Dinner was strange, careful. My mother asked about Big Mama with real tenderness in her voice, and for an hour, I let myself believe maybe this could be simple. An apology, some tears, a slow rebuilding. Then my father set his fork down. So root and crown, he said. That's really taking off, huh? Saw the Meridian deals about to close. 80 million. That's incredible, Deja. It is, I said carefully. You know, he continued, like he was commenting on the weather, that recipe, the shea butter base, that actually came from my side. My mother, your grandmother Corinne, she used to make that same blend. Odessa probably picked it up from her, back when your mama and I were together. I set my glass down slowly. Big Mama's mother taught her that recipe, Donald, in Alabama, in 1962, before she ever met you. He smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Family recipes get shared around, baby girl. Doesn't always matter who said it first. I looked at my mother. She looked at her plate. That was the moment I should have walked out. I didn't. I stayed reasonable, stayed calm, told myself I was misreading him. I paid for dinner, $1,100, cash, because some small, foolish part of me still wanted to prove I could be generous where they'd never been. I had no idea that dinner was a scouting mission. 4 weeks after that dinner, my general counsel walked into my office holding a printed email with her hand actually trembling. Deja, you need to sit down. My father had filed a provisional patent claim through a lawyer, a man named Gerald Combs, asserting that the core shea and black soap formulation behind Root and Crown originated from the Whitfield family line and had been misappropriated by Odessa Freeman decades ago and passed to me without proper attribution or compensation. That alone would have been outrageous enough, but it wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the second name on the filing, listed as a co-claimant, Bianca Whitfield, 19 years old, my half-sister, a sister I didn't know existed until that exact moment, reading a legal document. My mother had another daughter. 4 years after abandoning me, Donald and Renee had stayed together, gotten married for real this time, and raised a second little girl in a 3-bedroom house in Southfield, with dance lessons and a car for her 16th birthday. While I was selling shea butter out of a cooler for bus fare, I called my mother, and for the first time in this entire story, I stopped being reasonable. "You had another kid," I said, voice shaking. "You had another kid and raised her, and you left me on a porch." Renee didn't deny it. Worse, she tried to explain it. "It was different circumstances, Deja. We were more stable by then. It doesn't mean we loved you any less." I laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. "You didn't just abandon me, Renee. You replaced me, and now you're suing me for the one thing my grandmother, the woman who actually raised me, gave me for free." $26 million isn't free, Deja. That formula built your whole company. There it was, the quiet part, said out loud. "You will never," I said, "get 1 cent of what I built with my own 2 hands." I hung up, and then I called Aunt Pearl. The subpoenas went out on a Tuesday. By Thursday, my legal team had unraveled 20 years of lies in a single afternoon. Aunt Pearl, now a partner at her own Atlanta firm, sat across from me with a folder 3 inches thick. "Deja, I need you to brace yourself," she said. "This is worse than we thought, and it's exactly the kind of worse that wins us this case." Bank records showed Donald Whitfield had racked up $340,000 in gambling debt by 2005, the year I was left on the porch, to a private lender who was, at the time, under FBI investigation for loan sharking. My parents hadn't disappeared to sort things out. They'd fled the state under threat, using money my mother later admitted, under deposition, came partly from a life insurance policy taken out on Big Mama's late husband without her knowledge or consent. They'd stolen from my grandmother and dropped me off with the woman they'd stolen from in the same breath. Worse, Gerald Combs, the attorney representing the Whitfield patent claim, had a paper trail showing he'd approached Donald, not the other way around, after seeing the Meridian Capital announcement, offering to file the suit on full contingency in exchange for 40% of any settlement. This wasn't a father hurt by a stolen legacy. This was a predator who'd found a bigger one, and Bianca, my half-sister, 19, and, it turned out, drowning in $70,000 of debt from a failed clothing line her parents had bankrolled and then quietly stopped funding, had been the one who found Gerald Combs's number in the first place. She needed the money as badly as they did. I sat in Aunt Pearl's office with all of it laid out in front of me and felt something shift in my chest. Not rage anymore, something colder and steadier. "They didn't come back for me," I said quietly. "They came back for the 80 million. "I know, baby," Aunt Pearl said. "Now let's go make sure they don't get $1 of it." The Fulton County courtroom was packed on the morning of the hearing, reporters in the back rows, Meridian's legal team watching from the second bench, and Big Mama, 71 years old, sitting in the front row in her good church coat, hands folded in her lap like she was daring anyone to make this hard for her granddaughter. Gerald Combs opened with a story about a family recipe passed down through generations of the Whitfield line, about a father wrongfully cut out of his own daughter's success. Then it was our turn. Aunt Pearl called Odessa Freeman to the stand first. Big Mama testified for 40 minutes without a single note card, describing her mother's kitchen in Prattville, Alabama, in 1962, long before Donald Whitfield was even born, teaching her how to render shea butter over a wood stove. She described the note pinned to my backpack. She described 11 days of silence and a lifetime of raising a child that wasn't legally hers, on a cafeteria worker's salary, without a single dollar or a single phone call from either parent. "I don't have a formal patent," Big Mama said, looking directly at Donald for the first time since walking in. "I have a granddaughter who turned my mother's love into $80 million, and I have a receipt with 4 sentences on it that tells the whole judge everything they need to know about who built what." Then Aunt Pearl played the recording, a voicemail Bianca hadn't known was being saved, of her and Renee discussing, weeks before the dinner at Bones, how much the formula angle might be worth if they could get in front of the right lawyer before the Meridian deal closes. The courtroom went dead silent. Donald Whitfield's lawyer asked for a recess. The judge denied it. I didn't cry watching my father's face collapse in real time. I'd used up all my tears for him 20 years ago, on a porch in the rain. The judge dismissed the patent claim in full 9 days later, calling it, in her written opinion, an opportunistic filing wholly unsupported by evidence, apparently motivated by financial desperation rather than legitimate grievance. Gerald Combs was later referred to the state bar for the contingency arrangement. Donald Whitfield was ordered to cover our legal fees, $412,000, money I knew, with grim satisfaction, he would never fully pay. I haven't spoken to my mother since the recording played in that courtroom. I get a birthday card from her every year, unsigned by my father, and I haven't decided yet what I'll do with the 10th one when it comes. Maybe nothing. Maybe that's allowed. Bianca reached out 4 months later, not through a lawyer, just a text. I'm sorry. I was scared, and I made a terrible choice. I understand if you never want to talk to me. I haven't answered yet, but I haven't blocked her either. Some doors you leave unlocked, even if you're not ready to walk through them. Big Mama is 72 now, retired, living in a house I bought her 2 blocks from where I grew up. Not a mansion, just a good, solid house with a real kitchen, because she asked for nothing more, and I wanted to give her everything anyway. Every Sunday, I still drive up from Atlanta, and she still rubs shea butter into my scalp and hums Mahalia Jackson and tells me the same thing she told me when I was 5 years old, crying on her porch. Your roots don't determine your crown, baby. Last month, Root and Crown launched the Odessa Fund, a $2 million initiative providing micro-grants to grandmothers and other kinship caregivers raising children abandoned by their parents. No strings attached, no interviews required, just proof of need. We've funded 340 families in 6 weeks. I didn't build an empire to get revenge on 2 people who left me on a porch in the rain. I built it because a woman with a coffee can full of savings and a Sunday night ritual believed roots don't determine crowns. Turns out she was right. And I intend to prove it, 1 crown at a time, for the rest of my life. The story may be over, but the conversation doesn't have to be. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more incredible stories, and tell me in the comments what ending you imagined. Thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time.